welcome to Rick's Corner. I'm Rick Drasin. I was a professional wrestler, I was a bodybuilder, I was an artist, I was a guitar player, I was a tattoo artist. You name it, I've done almost everything in my life. But bodybuilding has always been a big love to me, as well as pro wrestling. Now I'm going to start back a little story because people have asked me about how I got into all this, because it's so unusual for a person to do as many things as I have. And thing being is that when I was growing up, I was always creative. School to me wasn't the thing I really wanted to do. Like most kids, a lot of kids don't like school, a lot of kids do, but I didn't like the academics of history and math and English, and I thought, I'm never going to use this. It's not, what's it going to do for me? I want to be creative. I want to build things with my hands. I want to create something that people can see. I'm very visual. I like the hands-on feeling of building things. So I started sketching as a young kid, just sketching people in restaurants and cartoon characters, and I had 17 years old, I got arrested for curfew at a pizza parlor, and I was taken into the sheriff's department, and while sitting at a desk I drew a bunch of cartoons and stuck them in the desk of the sheriff, not realizing that the sheriff himself had a kids show on the mornings, the weekday mornings at 9 o'clock called Deputy Howie. Well, the following Monday I get a call from him asking me, are you the guy that drew those pictures and stuck them in my desk? Are you Rick Drasin? I said, yes I am. He says, well, I have a job for you. Come down to the sheriff's department. So I went down there and he offered me a job on his TV show drawing cartoons for kids 5 days a week. Gave me $10 a week. Had me do commercials. And that was my first introduction to the entertainment field. Thank God I got arrested for curfew that night, or I never would have been where I am today. But it was interesting to me how that came about. It opened the doors to media. It opened the doors for working in front of the camera. And I thought, well, if this is the case, then there's other things I need to do. So time went on, and I was playing in a rock band. I was playing guitar on stage after I created this band, and we started getting gigs playing for high school dances, after school dances, the senior prom, Christmas formals, and I was good. I was a really good guitarist. I was seen, and I was taken to the Hollywood Bowl to do a performance there. We entered the Battle of the Bands in the Hollywood Palladium. We took second place out of 200 bands and got a contract with Capitol Records. I thought, this is it. I'm going to be playing guitar the rest of my life, and I'm going to be making a fortune. I had started working out in the gym. I thought, well, I'm going to get myself in shape. This is where the bodybuilding came in. If I'm going to be in front of people, then I better look good. So I joined a YMCA, and as many of you know who are my age, the YMCA's back in the day were deplorable. The weights were busted up, the bars were bent, they had a cable machine that was half frayed. In fact, I was doing tricep pushdowns and the cable snapped and cut my stomach all the way down. The bench press bar was bent, so when you would literally press it, it would wobble and flip around while you had it in the air. But I was still able to do 300 with it. Well, a lot of my friends started training with me, but none of them seemed to last, and I thought, this is something that I really wanted to do. Now, as many of you have done this, you read bodybuilding magazines as well as I did, and it inspired me. And coming from a small town of Bakersfield, a bodybuilder was a freak. I mean, it's like, you want to be a bodybuilder, why? Don't you want to do what we do and go away to college and become some sort of executive? No, I want to be a bodybuilder. So I started powerlifting, and I began doing the bench press, squat, and deadlift, and someone said, why don't you enter meet? We're having a YMCA powerlifting contest. So I said, okay, and we did, and I went down to House of Pancakes that day and loaded up on carbs and got real strong and came back, and I won the damn thing. I had no intentions of winning this contest, but I won. I was a very good bench presser, and I think at that time I was doing about 315, which was pretty good for me. I think I was 180 pounds, something like that. Well, when you start to see growth in your body and you look in the mirror and you see changes come about, you get more inspired to train even harder. Now, it's easy to quit and go back and not do anything and just live off the fat of the land and lose everything you gain, but I wasn't like that. Once I start something, I continue it. The way that I got into this bodybuilding thing was I had a girlfriend who was a cheerleader. She was a year ahead of me in high school. She was homecoming queen. She was on the swim team. She was awesome, probably the best looking girl in school. And a year older than me, and I had her. She was my girl, which is pretty unusual in high school to have a junior dating a senior that's older than you. She told me about training. She had two nephews that trained with her, that trained with weights at home on their barbecue bench, and I said I'd like to work out with them. This is before I joined the YMCA. I should have started there. And so I went to their house, and they had everything set up, some barbells and dumbbells, and they're working out, not really knowing much what they're doing. They're football players. So I did some benches with them and curls, and got me kind of inspired. And I thought, this has got to be a better thing than this. That's when I went to the YMCA. and completed my training, or continued my training there because they had more equipment. After about 3 or 4 months, she looks at me and she says, "Rick," I said, "What's up?" She says, "You're getting too muscular and lumpy." And I laughed at her. I said, "This is the idea. I'm a bodybuilder. Well, I want to be a bodybuilder, and I'm going to gain muscle, and that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I thought this is why you started me working out." "Well, a lot of girls are looking at you, and everybody's looking at you, and it's creating a lot of attention." Thank you. I like attention. There's nothing wrong with having attention. I have attention when I play guitar in a band. Everybody's looking at me too, and the girls are all looking. In fact, I took home more girls than the football players did. This is just an extra added feature of having the muscle on top of the guitar strings. Well, it went on, and finally she went away to school, and I stayed my senior year, and I worked out even harder. Then I entered another powerlifting meet, and I won that one. So I thought, well, if I'm doing this, I might as well start entering some bodybuilding shows. So in those days, this was 1962, 63, there wasn't a lot known about diet. In fact, there were very, very few supplements out. The health food stores had protein, which was, I think, was some sort of a soy protein, and then they had protein from the sea, which was like fish powder, which was just disgusting. But I took it because I thought maybe it would work. We had liver tablets, wheat germ oil, protein pills that would stick to your teeth like gummy bears. But I didn't care. I'd take anything that would work at that point. So I continued to train. I entered a Mr. Central California contest, and I took second, which was inspiring because the guy who won was really, really good. I mean, he had a lot of knowledge. He looked really well. And there's a term in wrestling called mark, and a mark is a fan. If you're a wrestling mark, you mark out when you see the big name wrestlers. And in bodybuilding, you mark out when you see the big name bodybuilders. So back then, being from a small town and looking at the magazines, I never really got to meet anybody, but I did mark out on them because they were like, those are your heroes. And back in the day of the silver era, which is the 50s and 60s of bodybuilding, you know, there was all types of well, there was Larry Scott, and there was Reg Park, there was George Eiferman, just to name a few. These guys were like in the magazines. These are the guys you wanted to be like. So that inspired me to train. And when people were in school and they were looking at their homework, I'm looking at bodybuilding magazines in between the pages saying, what's this guy's routine, and what's he eating, and how many days a week is he training? And I'd take it and I'd apply it to my own life and start the routine. Well, it was interesting to me that you start very little. Bench press, squat, and deadlift, and I was gaining off that, and then I threw in some curls, and I said, well, I might as well throw in some tricep work. Well, if I'm going to do squats, I might as well do some calves. And back then, the calf machine was a long chain with weights hanging on the end, and it wasn't very organized, because when you would do the calf raises, the chain would swing back and forth, and the plates would hit you in the shins and cut your shins up. It wasn't very comfortable, but that's how it worked. And I had very limited equipment. But I managed to make it work for me. And the diet, like I said, I wasn't right on the diet, but for some reason I had abs and I didn't get fat. And I was drinking 3 quarts of milk a day, because everybody says milk has a lot of protein. So you got to drink a lot of milk. What did I know? Well, no one knew, you know, living in a small town. So I continued to train, and at that time, and I was looking pretty good, every Thursday night they had wrestling in town. And every Thursday afternoon, a few of the wrestlers would come up to the YMCA and work out. And they weren't in great shape, but I knew who they were. So I introduced myself, and I said, you know, I wouldn't mind getting in the wrestling business. I've got a good body, and I think I could do it, and it's another form of entertainment. And so where do I go? And they looked at me, and they said, yeah, you look pretty darn good. Well, if you want to wrestle, you need someone to train you, someone who's a pro. Now, they didn't have wrestling schools back then. They had one-on-one. If a guy liked you and he was in the business and he had a big name, if he took you under his wing, he would train you and make you a star. So they sent me to Los Angeles Olympic Auditorium, which was about 120 miles from my house. I walked upstairs and met a lady named Johnny Mae Young. She was 40 years old. She's a women's world champion. She's 87 today, and she's still with WWE. So she gave me that eye, and she says, well, you look pretty good. You know, like, take your shirt off and let me have a look. So I took my shirt off, and I was pretty ripped, and no one else was. She says, yeah, I could make a lot of money with you if you let me manage you. She says, I'll charge you $125 a week. Well, $125 a week in 1965 might as well have been $1 million, because that's a lot of money to come up with. But I wanted it, and I was training hard. And here's where dedication comes in bodybuilding and everything else you do. I drove from Bakersfield 5 days a week. Now, that's a 2-hour drive each way to the Olympic Auditorium. I trained with her in the ring and a few other students for about 2 hours, getting beat up and bruised up and sore joints and sore muscles. Drove home, went right to the gym and worked out again. And then on the weekends I played in the band. And then I took another job working in another gym, which was a lot better than one I had. And I worked there 3 days a week. So I was able to train for wrestling, work at the gym, and play in the band all week long. And in the band, I was making $35 a night on the weekend, and maybe sometimes 25 or 50. So back then, that was a lot of money that paid for my training and my gas back and forth. Gas was $3. You know, it was like 19 cents a gallon, $3 to drive down there. But bodybuilding was the key to everything I've done, because bodybuilding gave me the desire, it gave me the perseverance, and it gave me the discipline to do things I wanted to do. Like I said, I was a guitarist, and I wouldn't give up on guitar, and I got great at it because I had the discipline to work at it. It wasn't practice to me, it was fun. Bodybuilding wasn't hard work to me, it's hard work, but it was fun, and the rewards were great. Wrestling was something that just beat the hell out of me, but the rewards were great because I was showing my body and getting paid for it. When the other guys were entering contests and getting trophies, I was getting a paycheck just for posing in the ring, doing the same, sort of the same thing. So these things all added up, and as my life progressed, I continued to do what I was doing. Now, back in the 70s, in 1969, I actually moved down here, and I went to Santa Monica. Actually, I moved to Torrance and got a job for Kellogg's cereal as a salesman, wearing a suit and tie, which is completely against my principles. I did not want to go to work for a company wearing a suit and tie. But it got me out of Bakersfield, got me out of the gym business, because I didn't want to die in Bakersfield as an old man working in the gym or in the fields as an oil worker or a farmer, because that's all you have there. And gyms come and go. So I took the job at Kellogg's, moved down to Torrance. I started calling on supermarkets. Of course, all the managers knew I worked out, and many of them asked me to put them on a training program, which I did. And I found that this seemed to be the topic of conversation wherever I went, either bodybuilding or wrestling. They didn't care about Kellogg's cereal. They want to know more how I built my body up. So those were the conversations when I would go into the stores, and it was fun for me to go in and talk to them. Now, if a supervisor rode with me from Kellogg's, I had to, what we call in the wrestling business, kayfabe, and shut up and not talk about it, because I didn't want them to know that this was the conversation. They wanted me to sell cereal. Well, I did this for like a year and a half. I was training at Bill Pearl's gym in Inglewood, which was like the really, really hardcore gym. And Bill Pearl was just awesome. I had seen this guy in the magazines, and I thought, now there's a body. Now I want to look like that. And next thing you know, I'm training in his gym and talking to him. It was everybody trained heavy. They trained heavy and they trained hard. I made some of my best gains in that gym. It wasn't anything elaborate. It was a hardcore dungeon type gym, but the weights were great, and they had them all the way up to 200-pound dumbbells, and I mean, just everything worked. Everything just worked possible. Just perfect. So I'd go over there and I'd train every day after work, and sometimes I'd go in the afternoons, 1, 2 o'clock, while I was supposed to be working, and I'd train. And this went on for quite a while. And then I finally decided I can't take this job anymore. I said, I got to move on. I want to go to Venice to Gold's. I want to go down there where the other guys train. I had heard about it. It wasn't famous yet. This was in 1969. They weren't doing shows. They didn't have T-shirts. Nothing was going on other than the fact that it was supposed to be a good gym. So I drove over there one day, and I walked in. It was a little smaller than Pearl, so I could see that the enthusiasm was there, and the beach air would come right through the front door. And I thought, wow, you can train here and get that nice salt air, and it's like refreshing and energizing, and I'll do my workouts here. So I paid the $40. I think it was $40 for a year, Joe Gold charged. If you had the money, fine. If you didn't have it, he let it slide. And I moved to Santa Monica. I just moved maybe within about 3 or 4 miles of the gym. I thought, now I'm in exactly where I wanted to be in my life, because growing up in Bakersfield, in a small hick town in the desert, 120 degrees in the winter and 30 degrees, in the summer, and 30 degrees in the winter, was not my idea of a lifestyle. It was just not my idea. You could go to the gym any time of the day there, and the gym would be vacant because everybody had an 8 to 5 job. So if you were in the gym, you were a freak. But in Venice, everybody was in the gym.